Hoi, oi, 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 dee-dee-da-dee-da, oi, 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 na-dee-da-da, oi, 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 oi. Whoa! Good evening, my holy sisters and brothers. Great to be with you. It's a Tuesday night. We've got a great little page of Talmud. Let's light up the darkness. That was Rabbi Shlomo Katz singing his great song, Nigun Mitzpeh, from his album Live in Melbourne. I mean, that's just such a great album. You could listen to that album over and over and over again and always be entertained. Fantastic. Rabbi Shlomo Katz, live in Melbourne. How you doing? Let me just turn that off. Okay. All right, who is with us as we get it going on a Tuesday night? Stephen in New Hampshire, Melissa in Great Neck, Carol in Cleveland, James in Indy, Yehudit saying Erev Tov, Nina Salin, all from South Carolina, Crystal in British Columbia, Renee in Indy, Lucy in Minnesota, Mr. Chand from Burj, Punjab, Faisalabad in Pakistan. Welcome, Mr. Chand. Nancy in North Carolina, Ryan in North Florida, John in Sedona, Elsbieta says Shalom, Kathleen in New York, Sharon in Lebanon, Yosef in Lowell, Massachusetts, PK in Colorado, Steve in Tallahassee. Over there on the YouTube side, Neil in Virginia, and Gigi in British Columbia. Welcome, everybody. We are on Daf Kuf Ches, that's page 108 here in Tractate Pesachim, the fourth volume of the Talmud, the laws of Passover. We're in chapter 10. We're still discussing Mishnah number 1, which began back on page 99. However, we have come back around to the Mishnah itself. We are discussing the laws of the Seder. These are laws as opposed to the laws of the Passover offering, the Paschal offering, the lamb or the goat that we could only bring when the temple was standing. And so we haven't been able to fulfill those obligations and follow those laws in almost 2,000 years. The laws of the Seder itself, how we conduct ourselves, the 4 cups of wine, eating the matzah, reclining, which we're going to be talking about tonight, as well as the 4 cups of wine. These are all laws which are very relevant to us. That is a continuous ritual. It's been going on for 3,000 years since we came out of Egypt. And these are laws we've been fulfilling on a yearly basis for 3,000 years. So let's get right into it. This is another short page, so we're going to be covering all of it. And thank God we're able to do that. All right, let me just get this thing set up right there. Okay, very good. So we're starting on near the top of page 108 on the A side. The Gemara relates that Rav Sheshis would fast the entire eve of Passover. So remember, eve of Passover, Erev Pesach, doesn't mean the night at all, actually means the day before Passover. So we're talking about the 14th of the Hebrew month of Nisan. During the day, we've already covered earlier in our journey through this tractate that we would slaughter the Korban Pesach, the Paschal lamb, on the afternoon of the 14th. In the last couple of days, we've been talking about the fact that we don't eat. We don't eat on the afternoon of the 14th. We stop eating so that we have a good, healthy appetite when it's time to eat the matzah that night on Passover night, the 15th of Nisan. From when do we stop eating? As we saw yesterday, from the time of the lesser mincha, the afternoon prayer. So from about 2.5 hours before sunset, we stop eating. Ideally, we stop eating altogether. Maybe we could have a little snack, certainly not a meal. And if we have a snack, it has to be the kind of snack that whets the appetite, not the kind of snack that would satiate one and kill the appetite. We want to arrive into the Passover Seder hungry. So Rav Sheshes would fast the entire Erev Pesach. So he would fast the whole daylight of that 14th of Nisan. And the Gemara asks, shall we say that Rav Sheshes maintains that this practice was necessary because of two factors? First, when the Mishna states that one may not eat adjacent to mincha time, from the time of the afternoon prayer onward, we learn this ruling with regard to the period of time adjacent to the greater mincha. So some people thought that you stop eating from the earliest time of the afternoon prayer, which is about a half hour after noon, a half hour after midday. And the reason for the prohibition is due to the Paschal Lamb, the Korban Pesach, lest one be drawn after one's meal and come to refrain from performing the sacrifice of the Paschal Lamb. So one of the considerations about not eating on that afternoon before Passover, the main thing is so we shouldn't kill our appetite. And that's why we don't do it from about 2.5 hours on. But one of the opinions held that maybe we should stop eating for the whole afternoon. Why? Because there was a concern that people would get involved in a large holiday meal, right? It's a festival pilgrimage. Everyone is up in Jerusalem. We're seeing relatives we don't normally see. We get involved in a big lunch on that afternoon, and it slips our minds to actually go and make the sacrifice of the Korban Pesach. So lest people do that, maybe they should stop eating right as soon as noon passes, right? From about a half hour after noon for the rest of the afternoon. So is this Rav Sheshes' concern when he would actually not eat that whole day? So that might be one factor. He wants to make sure not to miss that he doesn't want to be distracted from bringing the Paschal Lamb as an offering. And also, along with this, if that's Rav Sheshes' thinking, then we should also say that Rav Sheshes maintains, in accordance with that statement that Rabbi Oshaya said, that Rabbi Elazar said, that Ben Betera would deem valid a Paschal lamb that was slaughtered in the morning on the 14th of Nisan, as long as it was slaughtered for its own purpose. It was being brought as the Paschal lamb and not as some other kind of offering. As from the morning, it is already the time during which a Paschal lamb may be sacrificed, as the whole day is fit for the Paschal lamb. That's definitely a minority opinion. The Paschal lamb is supposed to be slaughtered on the afternoon of the 14th of Nisan. But according to this minority opinion, you could do it at any time during daylight on the 14th of Nisan, that all that daylight before Passover starts that night. So if it would be valid to bring the Korban Pesach at any time during the day, and we shouldn't be distracted from bringing the Korban Pesach by getting involved in a meal. So therefore, maybe that's why Rav Sheshes would fast the entire day. The Gemara is going to reject that reasoning. It was also suggested in the Jerusalem Talmud, the Talmud Yerushalmi, that Rav Sheshes might have been a firstborn, and what he was actually doing was just doing the fast of the firstborn. We have a fast on that day, which is the fast of the firstborn, meaning firstborn Jewish males actually are obligated to fast during that whole daylight before Passover begins. Now, that's a very minor fast, and you can get out of it, we've discussed this before, by making a siyum, by celebrating the completion of study of some work of scripture or the oral tradition, like our tractate that we're studying here. And in fact, for that reason, we're going to finish this a few days before Passover, but we're going to leave the last paragraph to finish then, and we're going to use it to excuse us. I'm a firstborn Jewish male, and so we're going to finish that on the morning of the day we observe that fast. It's not on the 14th of Nisan this year because Passover begins on Saturday night, and we never fast on Shabbos. Nor do we observe it on the 13th of Nisan because we don't make a fast on Friday when we're getting ready for Shabbos. So the fast of the firstborn this year is observed on the 12th of Nisan, which is a Thursday. So the Yerushalmi suggested perhaps that's why Rav Sheshes fasted all that day. And they say in response, and then it says, as Ben Betera, and where did they get this idea that Ben Betera said that you could bring the Paschal lamb at any time during the day on the 14th of Nisan? Because he interpreted the way the language is actually written at Exodus 12:6, which is normally translated as the Paschal lamb will be slaughtered on the afternoon of the 14th. The words that are actually used in the Torah are bein ha'arbayim, between the evenings. Now, the sages had reasons to translate between the evenings as the afternoon. We went through that proof actually a few months ago. But it could be translated as between the evenings. That's why Ben Betera thought you could bring that offering anytime during the day on the 14th, and perhaps that's why Rev Sheshes refrained from eating that whole day. But the Gemara is going to reject that reasoning, and it says, no, that is not what was going on with Rav Sheshes. In fact, Rav Sheshes was different. He was delicate. For if he would taste some food in the morning, the food he ate at night would not be effective for him. He would therefore fast the whole day so that he could eat matzah at night with a hearty appetite. I think that what we're hearing here is that Rav Sheshes was probably elderly at this point. Some people, when they get older, they hardly eat at all. It seems like their metabolism is really slowed and they just don't need to eat so much. And so if he ate any little thing in the afternoon, he wouldn't really have that hearty appetite that night. And that's why he refrained from eating that whole day. That is not a behavior that we need to emulate. And in fact, the halacha says, the law states, where they came out on this discussion, one whose appetite will be ruined if he eats at any point during the day should preferably refrain from eating at all on Passover Eve, on Erev Pesach, that whole day, so that he will be able to eat matzah in the evening with a hearty appetite. So if you're delicate like that, if eating anything during the day is going to mess up your appetite that night, okay, so then it would be better not to eat during the day. You're not obligated to fast that day. The fast of the firstborn is something else. We're not going to be going into that, its reasoning tonight. Let's just continue. We learned in the Mishnah. So now we return to the Mishnah. It had said that we don't eat from the afternoon on. Now we're returning to the Mishnah to discuss another one of its holdings back there on, I think it was on page 99, when we started this chapter 10. And it said that we need to recline, right? A Jew, even the poorest Jew, must recline. The way it's stated is, in the Mishnah, even the poorest of Jews should not eat until he reclines. It was stated that Amoraim, the sages of the Gemara, discussed the requirement to recline. Everyone agrees that matzah requires reclining, i.e., one must recline when eating matzah. And bitter herbs do not require reclining. Right? So those are two requirements at the Seder, at the Passover Seder. We must eat matzah and we must eat bitter herbs. We're also obligated to eat the Korban Pesach, but we can't bring the Korban Pesach since the temple is not standing, so we're excused from doing that. But we are all obligated to eat matzah and bitter herbs. And when we eat the matzah, we must be reclining. Here it says, however, that when we're eating the bitter herbs, we are not obligated to recline. Now, with regard to wine, it was stated in the name of Rav Nachman that wine requires reclining, and it was also stated in the name of Rav Nachman that wine does not require reclining. And the Gemara explains these two statements do not contradict each other. This statement is referring to the first two cups, and that statement is referring to the last two cups. So we have 4 cups of wine that we're obligated to drink at the Passover Seder. 2 of them are obligated to be drunk before we eat the festive meal while we're reading the Haggadah and telling the story of the Exodus and its interpretation. And 2 cups of wine are required to be drunk after the festive meal, one at the end of the Birkat Hamazon, the grace after meals, and the other during the Hallel, which we begin before the meal but complete and do most of it after the meal, and then we finish that and we have a glass of wine over that. So are we required to recline during all 4 cups? So Rav Nachman, it seems, might have been saying you have to recline for the first 2 cups and you don't have to recline for the second 2 cups. Hold on, the last 2 cups. However, it was not clear which 2 cups require reclining. Maybe you have to recline for the first 2 cups and you don't have to recline for the last 2 cups. Or maybe you don't have to recline for the first 2 cups and you do have to recline for the last 2 cups. And some say the explanation in this manner and some say it in that manner. Some say it in this manner, that the first 2 cups require reclining, as it is now that freedom begins. What are we celebrating at Passover? That we were enslaved and God freed us. God redeemed us from slavery and made us into a free people. So we are celebrating freedom. And reclining is a physical expression of being a free person. That's what reclining is all about. And so at the beginning, when we're telling the story of slavery to freedom, that's when we need to be reclining. And since reclining is a sign of freedom, while discussing the exodus from Egypt, it is appropriate to drink while reclining. By contrast, the last 2 cups do not require reclining because what was. In other words, by this point, one has already completed his discussion of the exodus and has reached the latter stages of the Seder. And some say it in a different manner. On the contrary, the last 2 cups require reclining, as it is at this time that we have freedom, because we've completed our journey through the Seder. However, the first 2 cups do not require reclining, as one is still talking about the fact that we were enslaved during that period of the Seder. And the Gemara concludes, now that it was stated so, and it was stated so, we're not sure if it's that we have to recline for the first 2 cups of wine or for the last 2 cups of wine, and good reasons have been given for both understandings. So there are 2 conflicting opinions, and it cannot be proven which 2 cups require reclining. So both sets of cups require reclining. That's where they come out. It's a little bit of an unusual holding because the idea that we must recline during the Passover Seder is not d'oraisa. It's not written in the Torah. It's not even directly implied by the Torah. It's a rabbinic decree to enhance our feeling of rejoicing and feeling the freedom. So the sages decreed that we must recline. In cases of doubt, with regard to a rabbinic decree, that we are lenient, whereas in cases of doubt with regard to a written Torah law, we are stringent. So since we're not sure when we need to recline, you might have thought that therefore, because there's doubt, we don't have to recline during any of the cups, but instead we have a stringent ruling. We have to recline for all of the cups of wine, both the 2 before the festive meal and the 2 cups of wine after the festive meal. And why are we stringent in a case of doubt with respect to a rabbinic decree? Because what could be easier than being obligated to recline? Okay, being obligated to recline. And the Gemara continues to discuss the halacha of reclining. Lying on one's back is not called reclining. Reclining to the right is not called reclining, as free men do not recline in this manner. People prefer to recline on their left and use their right hand to eat, whereas they find it more difficult to eat the other way. And not only that, but if one reclines to the right, perhaps the windpipe will precede the esophagus, the food will enter the wrong channel, and one will be in danger of choking. Now, for all of this reclining talk to make a little more sense to us, we have to remember that when they were having a Seder, when the sages were discussing how the Seder should be run, they weren't imagining people sitting in chairs around a table. They were thinking about a symposium. They lived in a world that at this point, right, the sort of Greek influence was giving way to the Roman influence, but in certain customs and practices, the whole world had gone Greek, as it were. And what was a symposium? A symposium was wealthy people who could afford to eat great food and talk for hours. not about idle things like the Greeks might have talked about, or even about secular philosophy, but rather to talk about Torah and specifically the Exodus from Egypt. But that physical arrangement of how they were going to be sitting and talking is similar to the Greek symposium, and that gave way to the Romans emulated that idea also. And to get a little bit of a picture of that, look at this illustration, right? So that is how people took this kind of a meal, this kind of a fancy meal. Not chairs around a table the way we imagine a dining table today, but these kind of lounges with a little, not really, basically an armrest, right? So the idea is, as you can see, you would lie on your left side, because most people are going to be right-handed. So you lie on your left side and take the food from the tray in front of you with your right hand. And everybody is arranged this way. Who eats sort of, bunched up in a chair or bunched up on the floor around a little eating area? Poor people. And so that's this idea that even the poorest Jew on Passover should view herself or himself as a rich person who can eat in luxury and who has the time to enjoy that meal and talk Torah, right? And discuss the Exodus from Egypt at length without worry. I have to rush off and work. I don't have to worry. I have plenty to eat. I have plenty to drink. Good food in the festive meal and 4 cups of wine minimum. As we saw, that was how we opened this discussion of the Mishnah. You must have 4 cups of wine. We're going to get back to that wine tonight as well. Where am I? Okay, so you have to recline. We know that, and the idea, and reclining means leaning on your left side, kind of on your arm, slave, feed me a grape, that kind of feeling like in the movies. But no, not the slaves are bringing you. Everyone should feel free that night. Now, let's keep going. A woman who is with her husband is not required to recline, but if she is an important woman, she is required to recline. Now, what's interesting here is, are you obligated to recline or are you permitted to recline? Everyone is permitted to recline, but certain people are not going to be obligated to recline. The law is going to come out that in terms of women, they are obligated to recline. Who's not obligated to recline? A student in the presence of his teacher. Because a student in the presence of his Torah teacher, because he holds that sage, that master in awe, he doesn't have total freedom even at the Seder table. So he's permitted to recline, but he's not obligated to recline. If his teacher says to him, listen, you should feel at ease, do not be in awe of me, at that point he becomes obligated to recline. Everyone is obligated to recline, unless they're literally in the presence of someone in whom they have awe. And that really means a student in the presence of his teacher of Torah. A son who is with his father is required to recline, right? You would think that, a son is always in awe of his father. Not so much, because the father doesn't expect the son to pay him honor, particularly at the Seder. He expects that the son will be like everyone else at the table and be reclining, and therefore the son is obligated to recline. A dilemma was raised before the sages. What is the halacha with regard to a student who is with his teacher? Perhaps he is not obligated to recline as he is in awe of his rabbi, and reclining is a sign of complete freedom and independence. Come and hear a proof that Abaye said, when we were in the house of my master, Rabbah, so Abaye, a great sage, but when he was younger, his teacher was Rabbah. And there was not enough room for everyone to recline on Passover. Okay, now you get the picture. It was in the yeshiva. It was full of students, and they just didn't have room for everyone to fully lean over to the left and sort of spread out like that. So there wasn't enough room for everyone to recline in the optimal way, so we reclined on each other's knees to fulfill the obligation to recline. And when we came to the house of Rav Yosef, he said to us, you don't need to recline, as the fear of your teacher is like the fear of heaven. And a student is subject to the authority of his teacher and may not or need not display freedom in his presence. And where did the law come out on this? A student in the presence of his teacher at the Passover Seder does not need to recline, even if he is not his primary teacher. The great sages of the generation are considered to be one's teachers, even if one never actually studied with them. But if a teacher grants his student permission to recline, then the student is obligated to recline. The teacher just said you may recline, but now he's in the same situation as every other Jew who's not in the presence of his teacher, of his rabbi, and therefore he's obligated to recline like everyone else. That we don't need. Oh, now, you must recline while drinking all 4 cups. Let me read you the law on this. One must recline while drinking the 4 cups of wine, 2 before the festive meal, 2 after the festive meal. If one drank without reclining, he must drink that cup again. That's how important the reclining is. Some authorities state that one is required to drink again only if he drank one of the first 2 cups without reclining, but not if he neglected to recline while drinking the last 2 cups. But that's just some authorities. The accepted opinion is you got to recline while drinking the 4 cups of wine, and if you didn't recline, you got to drink that cup again. Let us continue. The Gemara raises an objection. A person must recline in the presence of anyone, and even a student who is with his teacher must do so. This baraisa directly contradicts the statement of Rav Yosef. And the Gemara answers, when that baraisa was taught, it was with regard to a craftsman's apprentice, not a student of a Torah teacher in the company of his rabbi. So one who is in the presence of a person teaching him a trade is not in awe of his instructor the way a student of Torah is in awe of his rabbi. Another dilemma was raised before the sages. What is the halakha with regard to a waiter? So a waiter in this context is a Jewish waiter, right? So if he's not Jewish, then he's not obligated to do any of these mitzvahs because he's not Jewish. They only apply to Jews. But assuming you have a Jewish waiter, now he's going to be, and this is when the temple is standing and the Korban Pesach is there. We're bringing the Paschal lamb. So this waiter, it's understood that he's going to be serving the other people, but he will also be eating of that lamb. He's one of the group registered to it. Nevertheless, he has agreed to be working that day. Just like a rabbi is working on Shabbos, he's going to be giving a sermon, he's going to be leading services, right? People do work on Shabbos when their work enables other Jews to fulfill their obligations. So the waiter. What is the halacha with regard to the waiter? Is a waiter obligated to recline? And the Gemara answers, come in here a solution. As Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said, a waiter who ate an olive bulk of matzah while reclining has fulfilled his obligation. And the Gemara infers, if he ate matzah while reclining, yes, he has fulfilled his obligation. If he was not reclining, no, he has not fulfilled his obligation. Learn from this that the waiter does require reclining. And the Gemara concludes, indeed, learn from it that this is the case. So the waiter may be bringing the food in and out from the cooking area, the kitchen, or whatever. Remember, a lot of people, when the temple was standing, these were outdoor meals. They were sort of more like campsites. There were so many people in Jerusalem. But at any rate, the waiter is one of the groups. So while he may be bringing the food back and forth from the cooking area, when he's eating at the table, he's one of them, and he reclines in order to fulfill his obligation to eat matzah that night and to drink wine. And Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said, women are obligated in these 4 cups of wine at the Passover Seder, and that indeed is the law. You might have thought that since this is a positive commandment, and it is certainly time-bound, and women are not obligated, they are excused from the obligation of time-bound positive commandments, that they might have been excused from this one. But because women participated in the miracle of being redeemed from slavery in Egypt, just like the men did, they are obligated to drink 4 cups of wine at the Seder. Rav Yehuda said that Shmuel said, these 4 cups must contain enough undiluted wine to allow for diluting a significant cup. So in the ancient times, their wine was not like our wine. Their wine was much stronger, and for them to be able to drink it the way we drink wine, they would actually dilute it 3 parts water, 1 part wine. That's how much it had to be diluted to become drinkable wine. So what they're saying now is, okay, how much wine needs to be in that cup? It needs to be a significant amount, and you need enough undiluted wine so that when it gets diluted, you're going to have the amount needed for a significant cup. In Talmudic times, people would not drink pure wine. They would dilute it with water, generally adding 3 times as much water as wine. If one drank them undiluted, he has fulfilled his obligation. If one drank them all at once, i.e., he poured all 4 cups of wine into 1 large cup and drank it, he has fulfilled his obligation. Remember, this is Rav Yehuda teaching in the name of Shmuel. If one gave his sons or the members of his household to drink from them, he has nevertheless fulfilled his obligation. The Gemara now addresses each of these 3 rulings of Shmuel in turn. Shmuel said that if one drank them undiluted, he has fulfilled his obligation. Rava said he has fulfilled his obligation to drink the 4 cups of wine, but he has not fulfilled the obligation to drink in a way that expresses freedom, which is the preferable way to fulfill the mitzvah, as aristocrats do not drink undiluted wine. Right? So they're really going to push us to do all of these rituals at the Passover in the optimal way, in the most luxurious way. And so rich people would drink, they would dilute their undiluted wine. So that's the way that everybody is supposed to do it. So you might have fulfilled your obligation with undiluted wine, but it is not the right way to do it because you're not really giving full expression to this idea that we are free. And if one drank all 4 cups at once, like if you took the measure of 4 cups of wine, put it all into one huge goblet, and drank that all at once, Shmuel had said, yeah, you fulfilled your obligation to drink 4 cups of wine at the Seder. But Rav said, if you drink all 4 cups at once, okay, he fulfilled the obligation to drink wine as an expression of rejoicing on the festival, but he has not fulfilled the obligation to drink 4 cups, which require 4 distinct cups, each drunk separately. Shmuel also stated that if one gave his sons or the members of his household to drink from them, he has nevertheless fulfilled his obligation. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said, and this is the case only if he himself drank the majority of the cup. You can give people to drink from your cup, but you have to drink the majority of each of those 4 cups. Let's check the halacha, the law on this. If you drank them undiluted, if one drank 4 cups of undiluted wine, he has fulfilled the mitzvah to drink 4 cups, but has not truly expressed his freedom. In other words, he has fulfilled the mitzvah, but not in the optimal manner. If one drank all 4 cups at once, the one who drank the 4 cups out of order has not fulfilled the obligation. And this ruling is in accordance with the explanation of the Gemara accepted by the Rashbam and the Rosh. It does not follow Rashi's interpretation. If one pours the contents of the 4 cups into 1 large cup and drinks it, it is considered as though he had consumed just 1 cup. So we definitely don't do that. The Gemara raises an objection to the above rulings from a Baraisa. These 4 cups, I'm almost done, so if you have questions or comments, get them in now. The Gemara raises an objection to the above rulings from a Baraisa. These 4 cups must contain 1/4 lug, whether the wine is undiluted or diluted. So whether you dilute it or not, you have to have that minimum measure in the cup, which is 1/4 lug of wine. Whether it is undiluted or diluted, and whether it is new or aged. Rabbi Yehuda says it must have the taste and appearance of wine. In any event, this Baraisa is teaching that each cup must contain at least the amount of 1/4 lug. And yet you said that each must contain enough for diluting a significant cup. And they say in response that this and that are one and the same measure. And the Gemara explains, what is the meaning of the expression enough for diluting a significant cup, which Shmuel said? he meant that there must be enough undiluted wine for each and every one of the cups. In other words, 1/4 lug of diluted wine. This amounts to 1/4 lug of undiluted wine for all of them combined, right? Because you're going to dilute it, 3 parts water, 1 part wine, and you need to have 1/4 lug in each cup. So you need 1/4 lug of undiluted wine, and then you're going to split that into 4 cups and pour in 3 times as much water into each of those cups. Now you've got enough for the 4 cups. And the Baraisa said that Rabbi Yehuda says that the cup from which one drinks must have the taste and appearance of wine. And Rava said, what is the reason for the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda? As it is written, Proverbs 23, verse 31, look not upon wine when it is red. And this verse proves that the appearance of wine and not only its taste is important. We have a note here from Rav Steinsaltz. The fact that the verse issues a warning with regard to red wine is an indication that red wine is especially appealing and important. Therefore, it is fitting to use this wine for the mitzvah. You could drink white wine at the Seder, but it is better to drink red wine because wine is associated with being red wine, and as we see elsewhere in Scripture. And finally, the sages taught in a Baraisa, all are obligated in these 4 cups, including men, women, and children. Rabbi Yehuda said, what benefit do children receive from wine? They do not enjoy it. Rather, one distributes to them roasted grains and nuts on Passover Eve so that they will not sleep, and also they will ask the 4 questions at night. They said about Rabbi Akiva that he would distribute roasted grains and nuts to the children. It says Erev Pesach, but I think here they mean Pesach night, so that they would not sleep and so that they would ask. It was taught in a Baraisa that Rabbi Eliezer says one grabs the matzahs on the nights of Passover, meaning one should eat them very quickly on account of the children, so that due to the hasty consumption of the meal, they will not sleep, and they will inquire into the meaning of this unusual practice. Now, we're going to be talking more about this in days to come, but what's a very famous feature of every Passover Seder is the 4 questions. Ma nishtana halayla hazeh. Why is this night different from all other nights? On other nights, we eat leavened bread or unleavened bread. Tonight, why only unleavened bread? On other nights, we dip not even once. Tonight, we must dip our foods twice, etc. 4 questions. Now, those 4 questions are a script for at least one child to ask questions. So for sure, at least the youngest person present who's capable of asking questions will ask 4 questions. But that's just to make sure that questions happen. What we really want is that the children ask questions, period. And that's why they're telling us right now, how do we make sure that kids are asking questions at the Seder? One thing is, we don't do the Seder very late at night because the little kids fall asleep and they're not going to be there to ask questions. Another thing we do is we make sure that they're having candy, right? Sweets and treats, so they're a little bit sugared up and they're enjoying themselves. And then they're going to be asking questions. And we do all kinds of weird things at the Seder, unusual practices that should lead the children to say, hey, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Now, if the kids aren't going to, of their own accord, ask questions, all right, so we need to goose them a little bit, encourage them, get them asking questions. But the key point is we want people asking questions at the Seder. And that's why I've heard many times people talk about that they'll put symbols, odd symbols on the Seder, on the festive meal. Maybe not on the Seder plate itself, some people do, but at least on the table where you're having the Seder. And by the way, as we've been talking about, the traditional Seder was done on those loungers, right, with leaning on the left, and with just like a tray in front of them. In our home, when we have our Seder at our house, We don't read the Haggadah. We don't read the story and do all the discussion before the festive meal and eat the matzah and the bitter herbs and everything. We don't do that in the dining room. We do that in the family room. We all sit comfortably on couches and soft chairs, and we recline to the left, and we kind of get into that frame of mind. And yes, you can have some snacks during that period, although that's arguable. We won't get into that right now. But you should be reclining, and you should be drinking wine while you're reclining. And you want to just get into, that mode where you're chatting. You really want to be chatting. And not just reading the Haggadah like a script that, hey, let's just get through this as fast as possible so that we can get to the meal. That's why they're saying also you can have snacks at least before nightfall. For sure, you can have snacks then, just as long as it doesn't kill your appetite. But it's also good if you're not so starving that it's actually going to ruin the Seder, because all anybody can think about is getting to the festive meal. They can smell the brisket coming from the kitchen, and they just want to get through it. You don't want that. You want to have this atmosphere of discussion. And particularly, you want to get people asking questions. And best of all, get the children asking questions. Because that is what it says in the Torah. When your child asks you on that day about what happened here, so you want the child asking. You got to create an atmosphere where the children are asking questions at the Seder. And so you do it early, you give them the sweets and treats, and you encourage them in their questions, and you make things unusual and weird and fun, so that somehow that will lead them to ask questions, right? And if your kids never ask questions at the table, you got to find a way. You got to find a way to encourage them to be asking questions. Okay, now let's go to your comments and questions on tonight's daf. Okay, Carolyn asks, but what if they were left-handed? So what about a person who would normally want to recline on his right side because he likes to eat with his left hand? Hold on a second. I did see a note about that. Where was it? Waiter must recline. Reclining to the right is not called reclining. The reason for this is that reclining to the right is not a genuine expression of freedom. It is unusual to recline to the right in other contexts as well. For example, when reciting the Tachanun prayer, one reclines on his left arm. Wait a second, hold on a second. Here we go. The authorities differ as to which side a left-handed person should recline. The consensus is that for health reasons, he should recline to the left like other people, but if he reclined to his right, he has fulfilled his obligation. So slightly better, even for the left-handed person, to recline to the left like everybody else, but if he'd really rather recline to his right, he has fulfilled his obligation. Bill, with regard to the Jewish waiter, I'm surprised that the solution wasn't to have the waitstaff partake of the second Passover, though now that I say that, it makes it sound like the mitzvah is shift work, which isn't very palatable. Exactly. So the waiter is just enabling everyone else to enjoy it. He's actually participating in a mitzvah. He is enabling people to rejoice on Passover, and that is a good thing. And we don't want him, we're only going to push off somebody to Pesach Sheni, to that second Passover, because of something that's beyond their control, right? That they had to attend to a dead body, they were tameh, they're not qualified to eat the Korban Pesach when we can bring the Paschal lamb. Those people are pushed off to second Passover, but not somebody who's just helping others enjoy Passover. They're going to do it on Pesach Rishon, the first Passover. Yosef, I'm curious how much was considered a full cup and how strong the wine was. I'm sure they drank enough to be joyous, but not inebriated. So probably you asked that before. I talked about it. So like, what is a quarter lug? It's not any kind of extraordinary amount. Like it's, just like a good, comfortable, like a regular glass of wine, literally like a regular glass of wine. Now, we were once at a Seder with a great rabbi. I won't mention his name right now, but he's a great teacher. Loved, so much fun being at his Seder. I can mention, it was Rabbi Elchanan Shaf. And he's also one of our fantastic commentators on the Table for Five. And it was real. We were speakers at a Passover program, and so was he. And so we ended up doing Passover together at the table, and I was very happy to let him be the leader. And when it came time to do each cup of wine, Rabbi Schaff is not a big drinker at all, but he was like, I'm going to fulfill my obligation. And he drank each one of those cups, the whole cup. It was like a small glass, but it was filled to the top, and he drank the whole thing. It is definitely a mitzvah to drink the wine, not to sip it, right? So how much must you drink? Like the quarter lug, I think that's about an egg and a half volume. That's the minimum. That's the minimum of each of those cups. No, you absolutely do not allow yourself to become inebriated to where you're going to be sloppy. And if that would be you, and if you're sensitive to wine in that way, then this whole thing is unnecessary, because you can fulfill your obligation with grape juice. But whether it's grape juice or wine, you have to drink that significant amount. And finally, Susan Kane, the one who drinks all 4 cups at once, otherwise known as Uncle Marvin, should be seated far away from relatives who find him annoying even when sober. Okay, I'm assuming that Uncle Marvin is not a real person, but is an example of what you're talking about. It's definitely completely inappropriate to become sloppy drunk at a Passover Seder. I thank God I've never been present when somebody did that, but that is completely inappropriate. One thing I have found interesting, though, is myself, I'm pretty sensitive to alcohol. Like, I love having one drink and talking Torah, making a l'chaim. Once I have 2 drinks, it's like, what can I say? I'm a large person, but I don't drink a lot. So I don't need a lot. I don't want a lot. On Shabbos, sometimes I'm with people, like, come on, have another l'chaim. And it's funny, like, even though during the week, if I had 2 or 3 drinks, like, I'd be uncomfortable. On Shabbos, not so much. So there's something about, like, your soul kind of perks up. A Jewish soul perks up on Shabbos and Yom Tov. And you are able to handle a little bit more than normal. But you have to know yourself, right? As we talked about a few weeks ago with regard to Purim, are you Rabbah or are you Rav Zera? Right? Rabbah could drink a lot. Rabbi Zera, not so much. And you have to know yourself, right? So drink the amount that is good for you. What you want is to fulfill your obligation, to feel joy, and to get into a frame of mind where you want to talk Torah, and you want to discuss the Exodus from Egypt, and you want to ask questions and answer questions. Beyond that, don't do it. And finally, so Steve says, my Gemara says that the volume of 1 egg, that the quarter lug is, I thought it was an egg and a half. But about 1.7 fluid ounces is what he says in his Gemara. He's probably looking at the Art Scroll. I'm just going to quickly look this up. I should have had it with me. Quarter lug wine. I'm getting something else. Quarter lug wine. Halacha. Equivalent. How much wine? A quarter of a lug. Okay, Shulchan Aruch. Yeah, it's 1.5 eggs is a quarter lug. And how much is that? How much is that? I'm not getting it in fluid ounces, but it's an egg and a half, right? So it's about the volume of an egg and a half. And that's a very Talmudic kind of measurement. So just put it in your mind. Imagine all the liquid inside 1 egg and a half. That's how much wine each cup has to have. Okay, so that's what I've got for us this evening. It's wonderful learning with you, and with God's help, we'll be together again for page 109 tomorrow, Wednesday, at the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific. Have an excellent evening.